Hell, lose everything if I play this right. That single message changed everything I thought I knew about my marriage. My name is Derek Nolan, a 40-year-old software engineer working from my home in Spokane, Washington. I wasn't snooping. I was sensing our family tablet, updating photos, school schedules, when suddenly a stream of private messages appeared on screen. They were from my wife, Rachel, to someone named Trina Howard, a name I didn't recognize at the time. What I read next drained every drop of warmth from my coffee and from my chest. She was planning to divorce me. Not just leave, but destroy me strategically. In her words, I was emotionally unstable, paranoid, and controlling, a perfect setup for a custody case. That stung more than anything. For the past 3 years, I'd done morning drop-offs while she slept. I cooked dinners, handled doctor visits, and worked late to support her yoga retreats and art weekends. When she wanted space, I gave it. When she said I worked too much, I rearranged everything. But it had never been about building a life together for her. It had been about building a case against me. And from that moment on, I knew I couldn't confront her with anger. I'd have to beat her at her own game, quietly, legally, and with the truth as my shield. After reading those messages, something inside me shifted, something permanent. I didn't storm into the living room or slam the tablet down in a rage. I just sat there. My kids, Ellie and Ben, still needed breakfast. Rachel was upstairs, humming as she got ready for her yoga class. To her, it was a regular Wednesday. To me, it was the day my marriage officially became a covert war. I went through the motions like I always did. Made Ellie's peanut butter toast, cut Ben's apple slices just right, drove them to school while Ellie chatted about her spelling bee, and Ben showed me a scrape from recess. But inside, I was calculating. Rachel wasn't just unhappy. She was weaponizing our marriage to destroy me in court, and she wasn't alone. That Trina Howard, she was texting. I'd later learned she was a high-profile divorce attorney specializing in high-conflict custody battles, especially ones that involved discrediting fathers. For years, I'd been the default parent. I handled everything from grocery runs to PTA meetings. When Ben had croup last winter, I slept on the floor by his bed for 3 nights while Rachel complained about not getting enough me time. I'd chalked it up to stress, to needing space. But now, I could see the larger strategy: play the patient wife while quietly gathering ammunition. I started noticing all the subtle traps Rachel had been laying. A few weeks earlier, she'd insisted on couples counseling. Dr. Michael Ramsey, a warm, soft-spoken man she had randomly found online. I was optimistic at first. I thought maybe she wanted to fix things. But during our sessions, she'd say things that caught me off guard. Derek gets anxious about money, sometimes even paranoid. Or, hey, micromanages everything. It's like I have no autonomy. I remember sitting there, stunned, wondering if she truly believed that, or if this was all part of the setup. Dr. Ramsey would nod thoughtfully and jot down notes, occasionally asking me to respond. But every time I tried to clarify, Rachel would cut in. See, he always feels the need to explain everything. I can't breathe without a counter-argument. At first, I thought she was just venting poorly. But after finding that message to Trina about documenting a pattern, I realized Dr. Ramsey wasn't just a therapist. He was part of the script. Every session, every carefully planted story, every strategically timed apology after a fight, it was all designed to paint me as emotionally unstable and controlling. That night, I watched her closely. Rachel laughed at the dinner table with the kids, texted someone under the table, then asked me how work was, smiling sweetly as if everything was fine. She wasn't my wife anymore. She was my adversary, and I realized the most dangerous thing I could do was react emotionally, so I didn't. Instead, I researched. Washington is a single-party consent state. That meant I could legally record any conversation I was part of, so I upgraded our home security system, adding discrete audio features. I also began recording our counseling sessions, our dinners, our car rides. Every moment where her manipulation might surface, I didn't tell anyone. Not yet. It wasn't long before her strategy became more obvious. She'd suddenly bring up triggering topics. My work, her feeling, ignored, money, mysteries, and conveniently have her phone placed face down, microphone facing up. Once, she asked why I hadn't told her about a freelance payment that had hit our account. I should have told you, I said calmly. Here's the invoice. It was just finalized yesterday. Her eyes narrowed. That wasn't the reaction she wanted. She needed outrage, control, paranoia. something she could present in court. I gave her none of it. 3 weeks later, I decided to test her next move. I booked us a weekend trip to the Oregon coast. Romantic dinner reservations, beachfront walks, no laptops. I wanted to see if, in the absence of kids and distractions, she'd drop the act. For the first night, she did. She laughed easily, reminisced about our early days. We walked along the shore hand in hand, and for a moment, I almost believed this was salvageable. Then Saturday morning hit. Over breakfast, with her phone propped perfectly between us, she leaned forward and asked, "Do you really think we're compatible long-term?" It was bait. I stayed neutral. "I think we've hit a rough patch, but yes, I do. 8 years, 2 amazing kids, and plenty still worth building." She kept pushing. "But what if one person has changed? What if one person wants different things now? I guess then we communicate and compromise like adults," I replied. She sighed and tried another angle. "Sometimes, I feel invisible to you. Like all you care about is work and control." I acknowledged her feelings, gently explained the long hours were for our family, for her freedom. But nothing satisfied her. Every empathetic response was met with a twist. "You always make it about money," she snapped. "That's your language, not mine." That's when I knew for sure this trip wasn't about reconnecting. It was a trap, a stage, an isolated location where she could trigger a meltdown and hit record. She didn't get what she wanted. On the drive home, she texted furiously in the passenger seat. I didn't need to ask who. Probably Trina, relaying that I'd failed to take the bait. The next morning, she told me she had scheduled a new therapist, Dr. Eli Stanford, a specialist in high-conflict relationships. She said she'd already sent over OR background. When I asked what she meant, she replied, "I told him about your anger issues, how defensive you get." I said nothing, just nodded. But that night, I called my own attorney, Laura Jensen, a specialist in father's rights and high-conflict divorces. I laid out everything: the recordings, the messages, the therapy sessions, and her escalating behavior. Laura didn't hesitate. "She's building a narrative to file for sole custody. We need to get ahead of her. Document everything. Don't argue. And above all, stay calm." And I did. Every day after that, I played the part: supportive, present, composed. But I wasn't playing defense anymore. I was preparing for war, with the truth, the law, and a mountain of evidence at my back. For the next several weeks, I lived in what I can only describe as a carefully controlled performance. Outwardly, nothing had changed. I still made Rachel her morning smoothie, still attended Ellie's swim meets, still helped Ben with his science projects. But internally, I was documenting, analyzing, preparing. Rachel, meanwhile, grew more brazen. It was as if she believed I was completely unaware of what she was orchestrating. One evening after dinner, she asked if I'd considered voluntarily stepping back from primary parenting duties. "Just for a little while," she said, "to focus on your mental health." I stared at her, masking every instinct to snap. Instead, I asked gently, "Is that something you're worried about?" Her eyes lit up for a moment, like she had baited the hook just right. "Only because I care," she said sweetly. That night, I added a new folder to my encrypted drive, Custody Manipulation Evidence Phase 2. In it, I stored everything: audio recordings, dated screenshots, a diary of conversations. Every time Rachel said something designed to provoke, I logged it. Every time she claimed I was forgetting things or acting erratic, I documented my calendar, emails, and daily logs. I was building not a defense, but a timeline. By then, my attorney, Laura Jensen, had looped in a forensic psychologist, Dr. Peter Calloway, to advise us. "She's manufacturing a false narrative," he said bluntly after reviewing the material, "and she's setting you up for a psychological evaluation designed to fail you." His recommendation: preempt her move. Voluntarily undergo an evaluation by a neutral party, on record, before she files anything. I agreed. The process was rigorous: multiple interviews, cognitive assessments, even peer feedback forms from my coworkers and family. But the results were airtight. I was healthy, stable, and showed no signs of the paranoia or volatility Rachel had been trying to ascribe to me. The final report was dated, notarized, and filed quietly with the court. A digital copy went into my encrypted folder. Rachel had no idea. Then came the night she finally showed her hand. It was a Saturday. We had just put the kids to bed when she sat down next to me on the couch with a solemn expression. "I've been thinking," she began, "and I really believe we need to separate for a while." She said she didn't want to involve lawyers yet, that we could be civil. And put the kids first. I nodded slowly. If that's what you feel is best, Rachel, I won't fight it. She blinked, surprised by how calm I was. You're not upset. No, I said. I think we both deserve peace. That answer shook her. She had expected resistance, maybe even an outburst, something she could record. But instead I stood up, wished her good night, and went to bed early. What she didn't know was that Laura had already filed the paperwork 2 days earlier, on my behalf. Not only that, but we requested a temporary custody agreement that reflected the current parenting arrangement, with me as the primary caregiver. We attached the psychologist's report, along with select pieces of evidence from the folder. On Monday morning, while she was at the gym, she was served. I'll never forget the way she looked when she walked back in, envelope trembling in her hands, face pale. You filed for divorce? She asked, voice shaking. I did, I said simply. You blindsided me. How could you? I tilted my head. Rachel, you've been planning this for months. You were just waiting for the right moment to say I'm unstable. You've been coaching our therapist, recording our arguments, and texting a divorce attorney named Trina. Let's not pretend I'm the one who pulled the rug. She opened her mouth, closed it, then stormed upstairs. I heard drawers slamming, the closet door flinging open. She was packing, but not just for space. She was retreating. Over the next few weeks, things moved fast. Her attorney, Trina, filed a motion to challenge the psychologist's report, but the judge denied it on grounds of timeliness and lack of contradictory evidence. Rachel scrambled to assemble her own version of events, but everything she had, edited recordings, misleading texts, collapsed under cross-examination. Laura was surgical in dismantling them. One clip Rachel had submitted of me raising my voice was revealed to be selectively trimmed. My calm tone, the actual context, and her prior provocation were all laid bare thanks to my original file. The court wasn't amused. Then came the biggest blow. Rachel had claimed she was the primary parent, but financial records, school correspondence, and even statements from teachers confirmed otherwise. Ellie's swim coach said I was at nearly every practice. Ben's teacher said I was the one attending conferences. Even our neighbor, Mrs. Kaufman, testified that I was the one who picked the kids up when Rachel had headaches, or needed solo time. Bit by bit, her narrative crumbled. By the time the custody hearing ended, the judge granted me primary physical custody and shared legal custody, with supervised visitation for Rachel until further psychological evaluation. Rachel sat in stunned silence. Trina tried to object, but the judge shut her down. This court has zero tolerance for bad faith manipulation, especially when it endangers children's emotional safety, she said sternly. Later that day, after the hearing, Rachel stopped me in the courthouse hallway. I didn't think you had it in you, she said quietly. I met her eyes. You never did. She walked away without another word. Back at home, I sat with Ellie and Ben on the back porch. We had hot cocoa, watched the wind rustle through the trees, and for the first time in months, maybe years, I felt something return, stillness. Not silence born of fear or exhaustion, but the quiet that comes when the storm has passed. And I had survived it with my children safe beside me, and my integrity intact. Rachel may have lost control of the courtroom, but she hadn't given up the fight, at least not quietly. In the days following the custody ruling, she shifted her strategy. No longer able to play the devoted mother or innocent spouse in front of the judge, she leaned hard into painting herself as the misunderstood victim of a smear campaign. Social media posts began popping up, vague and passive-aggressive. Things like, when you give your whole heart to someone and they turn it into a weapon. Or, just because someone smiles in court doesn't mean they're telling the truth. I didn't respond. Not publicly, not privately. I'd spent too long reacting to her manipulations. Now, I let the silence speak. But her behavior behind the scenes grew more erratic. She began showing up unannounced, once at Ellie's school, demanding to take her home despite it not being her visitation day. The principal, Mr. Donner, had to escort her out after she raised her voice. Another time, she left voicemails on my phone at 2:00 in the morning, crying, begging to talk to the kids. Then the voicemails turned angry, accusatory, unhinged. I recorded each one, sent them to Laura, and quietly added them to our file. Then came the bombshell. Laura informed me that Rachel's former attorney, Trina Howard, had withdrawn from the case. She dropped her, I asked. Other way around, Laura replied. Trina resigned. Filed it with the court yesterday, no explanation, but I have a hunch. Sure enough, just 2 days later, Laura forwarded me a notice from the state bar. Trina Howard was under investigation for unethical conduct, specifically conspiring with a client to manipulate mental health allegations in a family court case. Rachel's text had been enough to spark a formal complaint. It was the legal equivalent of stepping on a landmine she'd planted herself. Rachel's new attorney, a fresh-faced junior from a local firm, looked overwhelmed when we met for the next hearing. A follow-up to finalize holiday visitation schedules. He asked for delays, leniency, grace while the new team reviews everything. Laura was polite but firm. We've extended every courtesy. It's time to finalize and move on. The judge agreed. Rachel was granted alternate weekends and 2 supervised holidays per year, pending a full psychological evaluation. Not out of punishment, but as a matter of child safety. Ellie especially had been shaken by her mother's outbursts. During a school counseling session, she admitted she felt scared when Rachel yelled and that she didn't always trust her mom to come back when she left. It broke my heart to hear that. Kids should never have to doubt that kind of love, but I couldn't fix what Rachel broke. All I could do was be steady, present, real. Meanwhile, Dr. Peter Calloway, the same psychologist who had evaluated me earlier, was brought back in, this time to conduct a full assessment of Rachel. Unlike my voluntary evaluation, hers was court-ordered and came with a deadline. When she arrived for her first appointment, she refused to answer key questions and became visibly agitated when asked about her children's routines. Dr. Calloway documented everything. At our final custody hearing that fall, his report was submitted as evidence. It was damning. Rachel was described as emotionally volatile, disconnected from parental responsibility, and exhibiting manipulative behaviors rooted in narcissistic tendencies. The court's recommendation? Sole legal and physical custody to me, with Rachel granted visitation only under therapeutic supervision for at least 1 year. Rachel didn't even show up to hear the ruling. Afterward, as I sat on a bench outside the courthouse with Laura, I let out the breath I hadn't realized I'd been holding for almost a year. "You did it," she said, closing her folder. "You protected your kids, and you did it the right way." I nodded slowly. I didn't want to win. I just didn't want to lose them. That night, I took Ellie and Ben out for pizza. Nothing fancy. Just our favorite little place with the red, checkered tablecloths and the gumball machine in the corner. Ellie beat me at air hockey. Ben spilled root beer all over his shirt. We laughed more than we had in months. It felt normal, it felt safe. Over the next few weeks, we settled into a new rhythm. School drop-offs, homework help, weekend hikes, bedtime stories. No more whispered arguments from the other room. No more tiptoeing around mood swings. Just peace. Rachel. She faded into the background. She completed her first month of supervised visits but didn't show up for the next 2. Her attorney sent a generic update. Client unavailable due to personal matters. Eventually, the court placed a hold on her visitation until she reapplied with documented mental health progress. I wasn't vindictive. I didn't celebrate. In fact, I felt a quiet kind of sadness. Not for myself, but for the version of Rachel that could have been. The version that might have built a life with me, rather than build a case against me. But people show you who they are, eventually. The question is whether you're willing to see it before it destroys you. As for me, I saw it just in time, and I acted not with rage or revenge, but with strategy, integrity, and unwavering love for my kids. And that made all the difference. Winter came fast that year. Cold winds swept through Spokane, and the holidays arrived with their usual pressure. Gifts, school events, and the quiet ache of what was missing. But for me, it also came with something unfamiliar: clarity. By now, Rachel's visits with the kids had become practically non-existent. After her second missed supervised session, the court froze all visitation until further notice. Her attorney sent another bland update. Client is taking time for personal reflection and wellness. That was their way of saying she disappeared. The kids had questions, of course. Ben, only 6, didn't quite understand the weight of what had happened. "Why doesn't Mom want to see us?" he asked one night, sitting cross-legged on his bed in his dinosaur pajamas. "She does, buddy," I said, kneeling beside him. "But she has some things she needs to work on first. Grown-up things. You didn't do anything wrong." He nodded slowly, but I could tell it didn't land. And honestly, how could it? Even as adults, we struggle to understand abandonment. How could a child possibly process that pain? Ellie at 10 understood more than she let on. She didn't ask much. She just became quieter, more independent. Sometimes, she'd walk into the kitchen after dinner and silently start washing the dishes, something Rachel had never once asked her to do. One Friday evening, after the kids had gone to bed, I sat in the living room and reviewed the final court paperwork. It was done. The divorce was finalized, custody was permanent, and all financial matters had been resolved. Rachel had waived any claim to alimony, likely as part of a quiet agreement to avoid further investigations into her actions with her former attorney Trina. I thought I'd feel triumphant, but all I felt was tired, like I'd been holding up the walls of a collapsing house for too long, and now that it was over, I could finally let go, but had no idea what to do next. It wasn't until I looked at Ellie's drawing, one she'd taped to the fridge, that something shifted. It was a picture of our family, just the three of us, me, Ellie, and Ben, smiling, standing in front of the little blue house we now called home. In her careful handwriting, she'd written above it, "The Nolan team, we've got this." That's when I realized I wasn't alone in this new chapter. I had a team, and they were counting on me not to collapse but to rebuild. So I did. We started small. Saturday morning pancakes became our ritual. We adopted a dog, Charlie, a lopsided rescue mutt who snored like a freight train and followed Ben everywhere. We volunteered at a local food bank once a month. I started a new routine once a week. I took each kid out one-on-one. A diner breakfast with Ellie. A park visit with Ben. Just time. Just presence. I also started seeing a counselor, not because I was broken, but because I didn't want to carry the weight of betrayal into the next chapter of my life. I wanted to be the kind of father my kids didn't just depend on, but admired. In one of those sessions, the counselor asked me something that stuck. "What did you learn from all of this?" At first, I said what anyone would say, not to trust too easily. But then I paused. No, that wasn't it. What I really learned was this: quiet strength wins. Not rage, not revenge, just consistency, evidence, and calm. I didn't burn her down. I built myself up. I didn't scream. I documented. I didn't smear her name. I let her own actions speak louder than any accusation. And because of that, my kids saw a version of me that I'm proud of. Not a victim. Not a villain. Just dad. Weeks turned into months, and eventually, spring returned to Spokane. Trees bloomed again. Ellie made the honor roll. Ben learned how to ride a bike without training wheels. Charlie learned not to bark at the mailman. Well, most of the time. Then, one afternoon, a letter arrived. It was from Rachel. It wasn't long, no apology, no grand statement. Just a few handwritten lines in shaky penmanship. "I'm sorry for how things happened. I've started therapy. I miss the kids. I hope someday I can earn back their trust." I didn't reply right away. In fact, I waited a few weeks. Then, after discussing with Laura and the court-appointed therapist, we set some boundaries. She could write to the kids, under supervision, no direct contact yet. No calls, just letters monitored for content, reviewed by their therapist. It wasn't much, but it was a start. Not for reconciliation between us. I was long past that. But maybe, in time, she could rebuild something with Ellie and Ben, if she did the work. As for me, I'd already moved forward. Not with a new relationship, not yet, but with a new foundation. A life built on honesty, stability, and the quiet power of showing up every single day. Because in the end, you don't have to fight dirty to win. You just have to be willing to fight smart. And never forget why you're fighting in the first place. And for me, that why is sitting at the kitchen table every morning, eating waffles with syrup and asking questions about dinosaurs and math homework. And that's all the victory I'll ever need. That summer, I took Ellie and Ben on a camping trip near Mount Rainier. No cell signal, no distractions. Just a small tent, a crackling fire, and two kids who'd been through more than most adults. On the second night, as we sat under the stars, Ellie leaned her head on my shoulder and whispered, "Thanks for not giving up on us." I didn't say anything. I couldn't. My throat tightened. But in that moment, I knew every late night, every court filing, every quiet step toward truth had been worth it. Because sometimes love isn't loud. It's not dramatic or flashy. It's patient. It's consistent. And it shows up even when everything else falls apart. Life won't always play fair. People you trust may let you down. But when you anchor yourself in integrity and choose the path of quiet strength, you don't just survive. You build something stronger, something unshakable. If this story moved you, or reminded you of a time when you had to stand alone for what was right, Share your thoughts in the comments. We'd love to hear your story. Have you ever fought for your family with nothing but truth on your side? Subscribe for more powerful, true stories about resilience, justice, and quiet redemption. Because sometimes the strongest voice is the one that doesn't need to shout.